Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Bluestein, and I'm Vice Chairman of Garfunkel Wild. I want to thank everyone who joined today to listen to the webinar, which we're calling Protecting Your Online Presence. Don't let negative online comments kill your practice. I think that this is a great topic, judging by the fact that so many people have signed up for it. So that's a good sign. And our speakers today have dealt with this issue. And the first speaker will be Dan Doherty, and he is Senior Director of Private and Group Practice Solutions at Doctor.com. And he's responsible for scaling out the emerging mid-market channel comprising of larger group practice. Also, a speaker is my partner, Kevin Donahue, and Kevin counsels clients all the time on their pre-dispute and litigation needs, and his expertise in connection with technology and internet legal issues that arise. Today's presentation is going to run approximately 60 minutes. If you have questions, you can use the chat box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen to post questions, and we'll answer as many questions as possible. If we don't get to that, or you think of a question later, you can send an email. Also, a replay of this presentation, if you want to tell your friends and neighbors how great it was, will be posted to Garfunkel Wild's YouTube channel, and we'll be sending you a link after the presentation, probably tomorrow, with how to access that. But the reason that we have these webinars, at least this particular webinar, is it's a run-up to our annual 2019 ASC and Healthcare Management Symposium. We've been doing it for 6 years. It's only 5 weeks away. We're having it on November 1st in Manhattan. And if you're in the ASC space especially, there's a lot of topics for you if you're thinking about joining that space. And we've also broadened it to be healthcare management in general, hence why we're having this particular session, which is not necessarily focused on ASCs. If you want to sponsor, you can get on the website at www.newyorkmetroasc.com. If you want to register, you should do that. We're approaching capacity, but to encourage people who have signed up for today's webinar to do that, we are offering for the next 24 hours, if you've registered today, a $65 discount, which will bring the cost to $285. You can call Mandy at 516-393-2294. Again, 516-393-2294. And she can give you the information and the codes to get that discount. And we're also going to be sending out a code that you can do it electronically. At the seminar, you can meet Doctors.com. They will be there, and obviously Garfunkel Wild will be there. And so that is the introduction. We will repeat the phone number again at the end if people want to register for the seminar. And with that, we can get to the meat of things, and I'm going to now turn it over to Dan Doherty, from Doctors.com, who will begin the presentation. Dan, take it away.
Great, thank you very much. So for those that haven't heard about Doctor.com, what we're going to talk a little bit about is just how to expand and protect your online presence. And so without you having to go do a ton of research while we're on the webinar here, I'll just kind of go over a little bit of facts about us. Doctor.com was founded in 2012, and our mission is really helping healthcare organizations deliver a really good customer experience at every step of the digital journey. And so one cool thing about us is, we have over 30,000 healthcare organizations that we power through our Doctor.com platform. And through our unique partnerships, our network reaches over 100 million patients searching for healthcare every single month. And with that, we have the only complete platform that actually enables organizations to manage every aspect of their digital online presence as well as reputation. And we're also a system of record for over 200,000 doctors in the US. So when it comes to their data and controlling the data, our record actually holds a lot of providers in that system. And we have strict, unique partnerships and direct API integrations with the biggest healthcare companies or healthcare directories and consumer sites in the country. Sites like Healthgrades, Google, Yelp, Bing, Facebook, WebMD, and many, many more. And so when we talk about today's patient journey, it really begins and ends online. Millions of Americans are researching healthcare providers online each month. And so if you're not doing something proactive to get your brand in front of them and present yourself well, you're really missing out on a massive opportunity. And a lot of people think that this is really a millennial thing, but it's actually not. According to a doctor.com patient survey, the 60+ crowd was relatively in line with all other age groups in terms of their digital behavior. And people of all generations are going online to look up doctors. They're, reading reviews about practices. They're looking up information that's published and using that guide to really make their decision with whether or not they should make an appointment with your office is really crucial. And so we're here today to really talk to you about, what you can do at your medical group to make sure that the brand and also the individual providers are well represented to expand the business and really protect your bottom line. And so we want to lay the foundation for a solid online brand. And the first thing to get started is really to get a right foundation under you. So what this means is it's something different today than it even meant 5 or 10 years ago. And for years, your website was the digital front door to your business. The digital front door to the business is where people are going online. There's the consumer, your website, and then now there's the consumer-driven websites that patients are going to today. But really, that's no longer how people use the internet. They just don't go to your website anymore. It's really more about the journey that the patient's taking and where prospective patients would actually find you. And so instead, they're going to click into sites like Healthgrades. They're going to click into sites like Yelp or Vitals, and they're going to find out information about doctors' practices and read peer reviews and make sure that they're making a right decision for their health. And in short, patients are shopping around for the right provider, just like they shop for anything else nowadays. And I'm sure a lot of you can agree with that. And so establishing a web-wide footprint is really important. And this means that the brand's footprint needs to be broad across the web. And listing information needs to be accurate on all the patient destinations that influence their decision-making. So things like inconsistent listing information or not having a presence on the right sites means that a lot of patients just won't be able to find the practice. And so this also hurts your brand's online credibility. The same goes for your web address, the treatments you offer, hours of operation, other things that prospective patients are looking for online. If information isn't accurate and consistent, you're going to see a steep patient drop-off or what we call maybe referral leakage. And so you may not even know that you're missing out on these patients, which could account for a significant missed revenue each month. Right now, you know what patients may come in through referrals, but you don't know what patients don't come in. And so making sure that these listings have all the correct data that you need to entice someone to pick up the phone or make an appointment is very, very important. Patients also search for providers, not brands as much anymore. And so one thing that I've seen marketing managers overlook is the simple fact that prospective patients, they look up the individual physicians and not the brand names, generally because referrals come in at the physician level. You know, if my primary care doctor is telling me to go to a certain type of doctor, or you guys, they're going to usually drop the name, not the brand name of the business. And so even at the multi-provider practice, with a strong online brand, maybe multiple locations, each doctor needs to be easily discoverable with correct, consistent information regardless. And you got to make sure it's consistent across the web. And so thinking beyond Google, you probably all know that Google sees the lion's share of patient search. So of course, it's important to make sure your brand's Google My Business profile and knowledge panel are up to snuff, but Google is usually the patient's starting point. It's not where they end up on their journey. And third-party sites have a huge influx of traffic in recent history, so it's really important to have your bases covered and have your brand well represented online. And review sites have now taken traffic from your practice website. It used to be when you just run a search, a lot of brand sites would rank from an SEO perspective. But nowadays, you'll notice for a lot of key terms, sites like Yelp, Health Grades, other review sites get prime real estate in the search results, mostly because they have an objective content that Google trusts. And according to Becker's hospital review, 72% of patients visit these third-party review sites at the very first step in seeking care. And that's a huge number. And you should start earning their trust from the get-go by making a great first impression. And that's where these sites really come into play. And so how you do this is really claim and complete your profiles on the most popular patient destinations. So from the patient's point of view, if your brand and doctors don't have profiles on these sites, well, you may not well as exist. And patients largely don't trust offices or providers without an online presence. And they'll seek care elsewhere if they can't find your brand or any individual physician. So make sure you have claimed and filled out profiles with the most accurate information everywhere patients are searching for care. And that leads us right to our next step towards reaching a stellar brand presence, which is showing off the brand to stand out on a crowded digital stage, I should say, and really to flaunt what makes the brand unique and different to stand out from competitors and amplify that presence across the web. So it's just not really enough to just claim the profiles. You really want to be able to enhance them and know how to build them out to be discoverable and to appeal to patients when they're actually seeking you out. And the autonomy of a high discoverable practice, there's a few things. Here's what a great presence essentially looks like on the first page of a result. If you were to run a search on a doctor here, let's say, the brand website shows up near the top, which it should, but the review sites that I talked about before, Health Grades, Vitals, WebMD, these types of sites, they're the ones that are prominently positioned on the first page as well, and they're complemented by star ratings as well as the Google Knowledge Panel right on the right. So you need to invest some time in building out online profiles, with these sites. We've talked about to show you the brand personality. And so it's important to include a rich biography of all the doctors at the practice so people can learn a bit about them. Just like most websites, you probably have a biography about your providers. Well, why would you not want that everywhere else that people are looking? So make sure to include where they went to school, what they love about the profession, hobbies, interests, any other facts or tidbits that will show the patients why they should pick that practice, awards, accolades, because at the end of the day, a lot of the doctors will have the same accolades, same awards, they went to the same school, they're all trying to do the same thing. What's going to make me choose them over someone else? And so these profiles, when they pop, it makes them stand out versus their competition. Using high quality photos to give patients an inside look at the office and then, the people who maybe work there. You can use, even on some of these sites, compelling video content to tell the brand story and explain its care philosophy. Another thing too is whether you like it or not, or if you were even aware of it, is competitors are actually targeting you for this stuff. And it's because these sites get an insane amount of traffic. And so be aware that, they could be targeting the practice with ads on the profiles. You don't really want to draw people to your pages and then have them click away to a competitor's page. And so there's ways to avoid this, which I can talk about later if anyone's interested. But there's one more subject I really wanted to hone in on and talk about, and that's one of the most important things you can do to protect a stellar reputation online. And that's harnessing the power of patient reviews to establish a stellar online reputation. And how you do that is collecting patient reviews to boost the brand's standing and win over new patients. And customer reviews, whether we like it or not, they're taking over the industry. Customer reviews are taking over every industry now. They're turning to the internet to see what their peers are saying in form of online reviews. Me personally, I have Amazon packages coming all the time. I'm looking up reviews before I buy the product. I use Open Table or Yelp to read reviews about restaurants, and sites like Healthgrades people are using every day to find physician reviews when they're vetting a doctor. So people shop for healthcare like they do TVs now. It's just, that's the way it is. And so we should be getting used to it. And reviews have a huge impact on the healthcare industry, as you are aware. About 80% of patients search for and read reviews when they're choosing a provider. So, they want to know if they're making the right decision and looking for that vote of confidence from people with firsthand experience. Most people even trust online reviews as much as they trust direct word of mouth recommendations. You could take the example of maybe 5 or 10 years ago, a friend would maybe recommend a movie to you, and you would just go to it without even thinking twice. Well, now it's the fact that I don't even trust my friend enough to go see this movie. I have to go see what strangers are actually saying about it. And word of mouth recommendations are becoming more meaningless. And so doctors and brands are starting to embrace reviews to make them stand out from competition and gain trust and loyalty from more patients. A brand's online reputation is really only as good as its doctors. And so, the doctors working at your practice provide excellent care, and that has to be reflected in the online reviews and star ratings from patients. A large majority of patients say that they would change their mind about seeing a provider with less than 3 stars, typically out of a 5-star rating. And there's a good number of people who wouldn't even consider a doctor with less than 4 stars. So ratings should be complemented by strong patient reviews across all major sites like Yelp, Healthgrades, Vitals. And it's because people like to read these firsthand testimonials and peek inside the patient experience. And if you have fewer than 10 reviews on any given site, you're very vulnerable to a single negative review that will significantly drag down the practice or provider's overall reputation from a star perspective. So, how do we do this? It's pushing more, you've got to push for more reviews. On the subject of negative reviews, many doctors and marketing managers hesitate to really, quote unquote, open up the floodgates as we speak. So being afraid of getting negative feedback, that's really what it comes down to. But the truth and reality is an unhappy patient is going to find a way to write a bad review about the individual doctor or practice no matter what. And, people will go online to vent. And so you can't stop it. In a general, the sentiment in healthcare space tends to lean real positive. But of course, your happiest patients, they're not going to think to review your practice after they've left an appointment. And that's why you need to take a proactive measure to approach review collection at the point of care. And so one thing with doctor.com is we have a unique system called the Review Hub, and it captures 8 times more patient reviews and helps protect your bottom line. One of the ways that we help practices do this is our review hub. It's a laptop that essentially sits at the point of care in your office or waiting room, and it just collects patient reviews. Then it publishes each review on top consumer sites like Healthgrades, Vitals, Wellness, and a lot of others that we discussed earlier. And you should see a little pop-up up on your screen where you can request more information about the Review Hub solution if you're actually interested. And we can also work with you to teach you or someone at the practice how to ask for reviews while remaining compliant with sites like Google and Yelp, which have strict rules around what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And so now what I'm going to do is just pass over to Kevin, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about the legality aspects of protecting your reputation. And also with the screen too, if we click on the next screen, there'll be a link here, doctor.com/scan, where you can go run a diagnostics of your practice, and then also doctor.com/demo if you want myself or someone in our office to really give you an understanding of more how we can help you. And we'll also give you these links as well in the chat box for your guys' information. So Kevin, take it off.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for a great presentation. Very much appreciated. So Dan gave us a good background as to how to establish your online brand and how to make sure that your footprint is functioning correctly across different sites on the internet, and in particular different review sites. With that being said, we are seeing an increase in negative online content that's affecting clients, and in the form of online attacks to their reputation and to the quality of care and that they provide to patients. And as Dan mentioned earlier, this isn't the type of experience anymore where people go online and they go right to your website, but rather they are going on to multiple review websites, whether it be Healthgrades, Yelp, Vitals, WebMD, Google, and they're aggregating data on and understanding of of their physicians before they make healthcare choices. So when they do that, sometimes they come across negative reviews. And when they come across such negative reviews, some of our clients come to us and they want to come up with strategies to deal with the negative online content. So just to give you a broad overview of the presentation today, basically what we're going to discuss is investigating and getting an understanding of an online attack, developing a plan or a strategy to address the attack, and then implementing that plan and seeing it through to get some sort of results with regard to the removal or otherwise dealing with negative online content. So first, we'll start with the investigation and getting an understanding of the online attack. The point of entry on that is basically getting an understanding as to who is attacking you. Typically for healthcare providers, the doctors and practice groups that we work with, the source of their attack is usually a patient that's posting negative online content. Sometimes it also comes in the form of a former employee. We don't, for non-healthcare clients, we often see that online attackers can be competitors in the industry. We don't have as much of that in the healthcare space. There is some. There certainly are. And actually, I did recently have a case where there was one healthcare provider that was attacking another healthcare provider and trying to take over local market space. But by and large, the negative online content that we see comes from patients and employees. And the other thing that we do at the outset when we're investigating these types of issues is we get an idea as to what flavor or what's the shape and the texture of the online attack. And they wind up in 3 or 4 major categories. The most common, and it's the one that we're mostly focusing on today, are the negative online reviews, or sometimes that they're not only negative, but they're false. They're defamatory and false online reviews. And those are the ones that'll show up on a Yelp or a Vitals or a Healthgrades. And then other times, and they can be a little more pervasive, and they're sometimes a little more difficult to deal with, but you can have a negative online attack that goes by way of social media. We get it, It doesn't pop up as much with in the healthcare space, but it does sometimes, or also on message boards, blogs, and the like. The one thing that I do want to stress, when we have clients come to us that are looking for legal solutions with regard to online attacks that are, defamatory in nature or that are harming their practice, and they're looking to have that online content taken down, it's very crucial to have an understanding of the breadth and the scope of the attack at the outset. There are firms out there that will offer a quick cookie cutter, quick fix and say, well, this is what we do. We're going to do a cease and desist letter. We're going to bring a lawsuit. We're going to do this. And they kind of take a one size fits all view of it. We don't. And the reason for that is because we found that the motivations for online attacks and the best ways to deal with them from a legal perspective, both prior to a lawsuit being instituted and then at the time when we go forward with the lawsuit, we need to know what the underlying facts and circumstances are, so that way we can keep it efficient and we can make sure that it's effective. Now, turning from the fact development stage to the development of a strategy to deal with negative online content and attacks. The proposed strategy is going to be driven by what we find during the investigation, and there's many different factors that we put into that strategy. So some of the factors that we wind up dealing with and we work on is, first, we try to get a handle on who the attacker is. As we mentioned before, attackers are typically, with regard to the healthcare space, it's patients or employees. But what we want to really get a handle on is that at the outset, we want to avoid making the situation worse. We want to get a handle on how broad the negative attack is, how prominent is it when you search, and what websites are they on? Is it a single review on a single website that we're dealing with, or is it multiple reviews on multiple websites? Does it seem to be coordinated? Is it over many different days or even weeks or months of time? And these all figure into the approach that we're going to have, the strategy to dealing with it. Now, what we typically like to do is try to figure out as much as we can about the online attacker. And it falls into two broad categories. There are those instances where our clients have an idea, or sometimes a very good idea. They know who the person is, waging the negative online campaign. And then there are other instances where you might not know. But in looking at whether the attacker is someone we know or we don't, you try to gather as much information as you can about them. Get an idea, is this an isolated incident, or is this a part of a broader campaign? Get an idea about them as to what's driving their motivations for posting of the negative online content. A lot of times what you're dealing with here obviously are people that are unhappy with something that happened during their patient experience, and they need an outlet for that. And they feel that prior to going online, they didn't get that outlet. So they turn to online in order to kind of get a remedy to what they feel is their aggrieved situation. A difficult conversation that we often have with clients early on, and it's part of the analysis, is how prominent the online attack is. We try to make an assessment out of the gate as to how much it's hurting the client, because before we wind up going forward and trying to get the content taken down, either by way of contacting the attacker or by contacting the website, or by resorting to going to the judicial process and going to court, we want to make sure that the client is comfortable with that approach, and that this isn't something that the client can deal with otherwise. And what I mean by dealing with it otherwise is that, can they leave it alone? If this is a single isolated review, the client has the better part of 80, 90, 100 reviews, and it kind of gets lost, and it seems like it's a crazy and outlandish review. Often our approach is to let sleeping dogs lie and just monitor it to see whether or not it versions into something that's worse. very often clients are happy with that kind of conservative, more judicious approach because it's cost effective, but also because very often some of these, this negative online content, gets drowned out, even as Dan Doherty mentioned, a good response is more and more positive, reviews to, the increase in the number, the sheer quantity of it can help. We look at how it ranks on typical searches, and we try to talk to the client about what they think it's doing in terms of how harmful it is to their practice. The other thing that we do is so we look at the attacker, we look at the prominence of the attack and the broad scope or range or narrowness of the attack, and then we look at the website that it's on. And each website, while they, many people look at websites as nameless and faceless entities, there are people that are working at these websites that are behind the scenes, and they care about the platform that they provide to the community, and they want to have content on their website that is reflective of the patient experience that people are having during their patient journey. So you can learn a lot from reviewing the community guidelines for a website and reviewing the terms of service for a website, and get an idea or an understanding as to what you're dealing with. Because ultimately what winds up happening is if you are going to deal with the website and try to talk to them about content that you may want to have removed or taken down, you're going to need to know, who and what you're dealing with and what the rules of the road are when you're dealing with the website. Now, this slide here just talks about other practical considerations that we have. There are client concerns. There's always cost. It's something we pride ourselves on being smart about here at Garfunkel Wild with regard to giving high quality services, but do it in a cost effective and efficient manner. And we talk about the cost not only with regard to the services, but also that the cost, what are the damages being suffered by the client, and what are the costs to the client, not only economically, but what's the client's tolerance to have to deal with this negative online attack going forward. Meaning, the dealing with these not only takes time and money to deal with, but it also takes you away from practicing medicine, or it takes you away from otherwise developing or growing your practice. And some clients are very fixated on making sure that the negative online contact and the attacks that they often suffer are kind of taken care of and rooted out, while others, have a less of a tolerance for, bearing those costs and want this done more quickly and more expeditiously. There are legal issues that we deal with in terms of jurisdiction, statute of limitations, timing on the claim, defamation claims, which these, if and when you do go to court, that's what these typically boil down to. Defamation very often has a 1-year statute of limitations or other abbreviated short statutes that you have to be aware of. And then you have to be able to know the strength of your claim later on and quantifying your damages. It's one thing to come forward and say, that the negative online content was improperly posted. It's another to have to prove it in a court of law to a judge and jury and to show that it caused you some economic harm. But we'll talk a little more about that later. Now, when we do this, we do take a multifaceted approach to it. We're very cognizant of some of the large practice groups that we deal with, and our other healthcare providers, they have internal marketing departments. They have directors of marketing, or they deal with public relations. They have their own cybersecurity and investigative firms that they work with, and then they even have their financial advisors and accountants and the like that provide them with advice. Very often, what we will do with the client is before we roll out our strategy to deal with a certain negative online attack and situation, we will consult not only with the client, but during that investigation, we'll also deal with the other advisors that they work with on a daily basis. So now, once we've reviewed the situation, investigated it, and we've come up with a general strategy or plan to deal with it, then we come to the point where we're going to implement the plan and try to get some results with regard to negative online content. And with regard to online content. I think Dan mentioned something that was very helpful earlier in the presentation today, with regard to understanding the prominence of material, negative and positive, that's out in the internet about you. There is a lot with regard to search engine optimization that can be done to drive down or to drive away negative online content. And that's very helpful. And very often you do that through driving more positive content or through other, means. That is not what I'm focused on, though, when clients come to us. Our clients are looking for they're looking for removal. They're looking for the content to no longer be there online and to be taken down, either by the attacker, the person who posted it, either by the website who is hosting the content and serving as the platform for it, or by going to a judge and getting an order, in a judicial setting that will force the attacker and/or the website to take down the content. So a lot of what I'm discussing now is about removal, and it's something that works hand in hand. And when we do talk to other advisors that we work with our clients, we're always very cognizant of the fact that, is this something that we can just simply drive down through search engine optimization, or is it something that they really need to have taken down and they want to spend the time and the resources on going after? Now, there's 2 points of entry before going to court. There are 2 major points of entry that we pursue. One is to reach out to the online attacker, and the other is to reach out to the website. And sometimes we do one to the exclusion of the other. Sometimes we do both in tandem, or we do them in a staged process. We usually always advocate to reach out to the attacker and/or to the website before going to court, for a couple of reasons. Very often it's much more efficient, it's more cost effective, and it can be done much more quickly. Going to court can be a timely and costly process, but one that we do pursue when all other possible remedies fail. So turning to the first of those, going after and speaking to and reaching out to the online attacker, very often our clients, as I mentioned earlier, have a strong suspicion as to who the online attacker is. If in those instances when the client does know who's posting the negative content, we do an analysis with the client as to whether or not it makes sense to reach out to the attacker. And if so, while we're doing that, we talk to the client about the experience that the person that posted the negative online content had with our client, what their primary complaints were, and if there's any way that we can, deal with them to ameliorate the situation. And we talk about there's always you can get further with flies, you can catch more flies, with honey than with vinegar, and it's the old carrot and the rod type approach. Very often, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the people are posting online content because they're unhappy. If you can get to the source of their unhappiness and you can somehow try to fix that unhappiness, very often people who post online content are open to the idea of removing it and taking it down. And we've had a lot of success in approaching patients and former employees that had a gripe, and then we do our best to address that gripe. And lo and behold, they are a little more softer in their online approach to the healthcare practice or the healthcare provider, and we get very good results in that regard. If you can't get it with honey, and you can't do it by way of being friendly and nice to them, we can take a stronger, more firm approach and send a cease and desist letter. A lot of times that involves an analysis as to whether or not we think that the online attacker will kind of fold up their tent and go home when they're threatened with the ramifications of leaving the content online that we believe is defamatory, harmful to our client's reputation. But the big thing that we talk about with our clients all the time is when we do send lawyer letters that are cease and desist letters, in the first instance, we always want to make sure that we're not going to do more harm than good, because this person has already gone online and they already have a problem with the healthcare provider. They have an issue with the practice. We don't want to give them yet another issue by sending them a cease and desist letter, which inevitably they will post online, or they will describe, unfavorably online and say, look at this. I exercise my rights to express an opinion with regard to this healthcare provider. And what did the healthcare provider do? They went and got an attorney and sent me a lawyer letter, threatening to sue me or threatening that I had to take it down right away. So while many of our clients initially come to us and say, send a cease and desist, get this to stop as quickly as possible, very often we're slow to do so, or we're kind of measured in that response. And we want to make sure that it's something that we think we're actually going to get traction with when we do, send it to an online attacker. Now, that all assumes that we know who the online attacker is. If we don't, there are other things that we need to do to kind of figure out who the online attacker is. And there are judicial processes for that, as well as reaching out to the website and trying to, by way of a court order or a subpoena, to get information about people who post online. One thing I want to talk to you about is that in lieu of reaching out to the attacker, very often we either don't know who the attacker is, or we think the attacker is not going to be amenable to a soft, friendly approach, trying to get the content taken down, or to a more aggressive, stronger approach of a cease and desist lawyer letter. So then what we wind up doing is we say, okay, we might leave the attacker alone, and we might go straight to the website. And what the website, websites are there are different federal rules and regulations that govern, website conduct with regard to the hosting of content. And the major law is the Communications Decency Act. It was enacted in the mid to late 1990s. I think it was in 1996. And that's the backdrop that all websites rely upon with regard to immunity for website liability for content that's held on the website. Very often our clients come to us and they say, I want to sue Yelp, I want to sue Healthgrades, I want to go after Vitals, let's get Google in court. And the answer is well, no, they're immune from liability. They just provide the platform for the attacker to use. It goes back to actually the publisher liability, the New York Times and Random House, the different publishers of the world. You don't go after them, you go after the author of the publication, the one who actually expressed the defamatory content. It's the same thing in the online world. And now the Communications Decency Act, it's a double-edged sword. And without getting too much into the detail of it, there's two things that the Act does for websites with regard to when they host content. Number one is, if there's content on the website and it's harmful to you as a healthcare provider, and the website decides to leave it up, they're immune from any liability for leaving it up, even if it's defamatory, and even if it's blatantly defamatory, they can leave it up and they're not going to be held liable for it. But little known to very many people is that the websites also have the equal and same immunity if they take the content down. And websites very often need to be reminded of that they have a community that they're serving, and that their content has to be true and fair and honest. And if you can go to a website and give them a persuasive explanation and identify to them why the content that is posted on their website is in violation of their terms of use or to their community guidelines, the community standards, you can very often convince a website to take down content. Now, when doing that, what we try to do in the first instance, because websites aren't these nameless, faceless, entities, but they're run by people, we try to get a person on the phone. We try to talk to someone, and we try to get to someone we try to put a face on this and say, there's a doctor on the other end of this, there's a healthcare practice that is being harmed substantially and significantly by this negative attack, by this online attacker. And we try to deal with them that way. Short of that, or if that's not working, then we can also follow up with writings. You send emails and letters and deal with them. And during it, we make reasoned arguments and persuasive arguments as to why the content that's online is defamatory, why it's unfair, and why it should be taken down. The websites very often don't want to act as judge and jury on these things, but they do have the ability under the Communications Decency Act to do exactly that. And if you can say to them, look, you've established a reputable online presence, and the community that you serve relies on you to post only content that's helpful, worthwhile, and goes to the consumer experience, goes to the patient's experience. And this review that's on here doesn't serve any purposes for that. Very often the websites will deal with you on that, and they'll agree to take it down. Now, that brings us to to the last part of the presentation before we go to the Q&A area. And there are judicial remedies. You can also obviously go to court. As I mentioned earlier, going to court is our last resort for a few reasons. One is there are other quicker solutions before going to court, and those quicker solutions are usually less costly. But in those instances when we either don't know who the online attacker is, we're striking out with the online attacker and/or with the website, or we're otherwise having issues in getting information or getting the result that we want with regard to the negative, unfair, defamatory content, we can bring a lawsuit. What we wind up doing is we wind up going, the ultimate goal of the lawsuit is to get a court order that tells the attacker and/or the website to take the content down. In the midst of that lawsuit, though, very often we have to get information about the online attacker so as to appropriately target our claims to the right party. And if the online attacker isn't known to us, we do have to resort sometimes to legal proceedings in order to get information about that. So that is a rather quick, rather broad overview. I'm right at my time limit, so I want to be cognizant of that. What I'd like to do is open it up now to, thank you for your time very much, and open it up to questions and answers. We already do have one question, I think. Let me just see here. All right, so we have one question. Dan, I think this one might be good for you. Where can someone learn more about increasing their online presence? Specifically, where should they go? Is there anything that Doctor.com can help with that?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I'll have Brad post this in the content or the chat room, Doctor.com/demo. I would just go to that link if you want to learn more in regards to getting a scan of your online presence. So it'll be a custom scan review link. Just fill out the information. Myself or one of my guys will get back to you, and we can kind of do like a high level analysis of everything that we can work on for you guys. So Brad should be able to put that into the chat for you folks, and I would just write it down or click on it and fill out the details, and we'll get back to you guys ASAP.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dan. Do we have, so we have another question, Dan. What is a good way to ask a patient for a positive review? Or how best can you approach a patient when looking for reviews to ensure that they wind up being positive content and not negative?
Yeah, so our approach really with the Review Hub too, and we do have some good training with it, it's really about handpicking the people that you already know love you, right? So it's those people in the office that are kind of smiling or relieved when they're coming out, or are super friendly with the staff, and the approach is more along the line of, hey, we're looking for more feedback about how we did today. Would you mind taking a few seconds to answer a few questions? And so the questions, at least on our device, are HIPAA compliant questions that line directly up with the healthcare sites. And patients just click on the stars, but we have our average is a 4.6, 4.7 rating with the actual device. And so again, be smart about who you approach, because those people who are negative, they're going to go online no matter what. So you might as well just have them go online and write, but try to get as many as positive when you can in the office. And so we have pretty cool tactics on how we do that stuff.
Thanks, Dan. We have another question came in. Is it recommended to respond to negative online reviews? So I can respond to this, but I'd actually appreciate your take on it, Dan, and then I likewise will jump in as well.
I mean, so you just got to be careful about it. It's just due to the HIPAA aspect, and if the person's angry and it causes legality issues. But it's not a bad thing to respond to negative reviews, but keep it high level. Hey, sorry for your experience. Please contact the office so we can make it better. Something along that line. You don't ever want to address like the actual the circumstance at hand. And maybe you guys could shed some more light on if it's not an actual patient and legality issues on how maybe someone could approach that aspect. But if it comes down to someone complaining or whatever, we just say contact the office, and then that lets people know, like, okay, that person could be crazy. It's not actually the practice. It lets other people see that you're actually taking time to respond.
So I would agree with everything you just said, and I actually would take it one step further. What our general advice is from a legal perspective and from a practical one, frankly, is that what we counsel our clients to do is to not be afraid to respond to negative online content, but before doing so, to work with us to see whether or not we can get the content down first. If it, or we can deal with it another way. If you can either get the content driven down in such a way that it's innocuous through SEO type approaches, or you can get it taken down by approaching the attacker or by approaching the website. We like to do that. If that fails and the client says, you know what, I don't think I have the time or the resources necessarily or the stomach to go forward with a lawsuit on this, but I do want to deal with this negative online content, we generally tell them to do 2 or 3 different things. Number one, we ask them to draft it and then to send us a draft of it, and we work with them on it to make sure that their public relations and marketing people aren't doing anything that's violative of any law, including, as Dan mentioned, HIPAA. While the client may be putting their experience in issue, the client is not putting, obviously, their healthcare, the diagnosis, their prognosis, or anything like that in issue. And you do keep it, as Dan even mentions, on a 30,000 foot on a very high level. And then what we wind up doing is we take a sandwich approach to it, meaning that we thank the person for their review. We let the audience know that this practice cares about reviews, takes them seriously, and is open to the exchange of ideas in an online forum. However, we disagree with it, and on a very high level, we give the 1 or 2 or 3 reasons as to why we disagree with the review. But then we end on a positive note as best as possible, and thanking the person again and letting them know that we want to make sure that they have a positive experience going forward, and if there's anything that we can do to further help with that. But again, we take that approach only after we've exhausted other remedies that are available to our clients. We don't just run off and respond to negative content all the time. But I will say this, as a general matter, our clients do typically like responding if they are not going to be successful in getting the information driven down or removed entirely. They do think, and it has been shown that it's a positive thing that if the healthcare provider takes the time to respond in a meaningful and careful way, that it can neutralize or otherwise kind of reduce the effect of that negative online review. I mean, that and a bunch of other positive reviews always help. Next question. Okay, so this is with regard to mid-market size doctor practices, and so whether it makes sense for smaller doctor practices and or mid-market or larger practices to work with Doctor.com, and or should, depending on the size of the practice, is it more helpful for them just to rely instead on their internal public relations or marketing personnel?
Yeah, so I would say, look, we can work with the solo practitioner that has 1 location, and I work with practices with 100+ locations. The challenge is with the solo doctor, they're super busy. They're not very familiar with how these healthcare sites maybe work, or even how to have access to them. Let alone their marketing person in their office is probably just focusing on maybe the external branding things and their website, which is perfect because we don't touch that. The challenge becomes having access to those sites and updating the profiles, which a lot of the smaller marketing managers really can't get a hold of these sites to update doctors' information. And that's where they go to us. For larger group practices, it's awesome because there's so many different sites and you have so many providers, and the challenge is keeping their listings up to date. Maybe you have high turnover, and so people come, people go, and it's keeping that information all up to speed. But then also, again, unlocking tools and features on these sites that you or your web guy do not have access to, just because of the sheer partnerships that I have with these sites, to be able to have calls to action. And so having one central platform where you can control all your profiles and all your locations and have it spread out to multiple healthcare sites in one shot saves you a ton of time so you can focus on the bigger picture, which is the brand aspect and getting the exposure in your local areas. So
So
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dan.
No. So I would say for both, we knock it out of the park for both. Solo doctors, it's easy for us. Larger group practices, we got to build out our platform for you. But once it's built out, I mean, you're up and running and it's rocking. So it's good for both perspectives.
I have a question, actually. This is Kevin Donahue speaking. So then how does Doctor.com's Review Hub, does it have, how do I best say this? Is there any conflict with any of the IP address restrictions that are out there? How do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So primarily what happens is if, you might have a marketing guy or someone in the office trying to collect Google or Yelp reviews right in the office. The challenge with that is they're going to catch you because it's coming from your IP address. Or also they have what we call filtering, and a lot of these companies will filter reviews for Google. Press 4 or 5 if you like the doctor. Press 1, 2, or 3 if you don't. And so if you don't, it comes back internally, and where that causes conflict is it's called review negating, and it's against Yelp and Google's terms of service. So they do not like that, 1. And 2, the healthcare sites don't require IP addresses. So through our partnership with these actual companies, the healthcare sites will automatically syndicate after we approve them, check for slander, check for anything that's HIPAA compliant. We'll automatically syndicate those reviews to the healthcare sites on your behalf with no IP address issues. For Google and Yelp, what the device would actually do is send out a text message request for Google or Yelp. If the person has a Gmail account, it'll send the Gmail link. If they don't, we'll send the Yelp link. But it's going to their phone or email as a text. So by the time they leave the office, they have it and there's no IP. So we follow all guidelines. We are partner with these companies. They have strict rules, and so there's no shady business, to put it in layman's terms for you guys.
Okay, now we got another question. I think it's a decent jumping off point for this one. So someone said, other than providing a laptop for patients to leave reviews while they're there in the office, in the waiting room, or when they're leaving or there, are there any other methods that Doctor.com offers that encourages a patient to post reviews after they have left the facility? So I guess how do you have a patient do a review if they're not doing it on the spot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have the companion tool, which is essentially, let's say someone's in a rush and they don't do the device, and you're like, oh, we should have got those people. We have the companion tool, which we launch on your desktops. It's essentially a virtual review hub, and it's brand new. We just launched it, I think, a few weeks ago, where you can send it out as a text message to the patient, and they can do the star ratings right from their phone, and then it'll work exactly like how we just described with the review hub, which is pretty cool. So it's a great tool for marketers in regards to getting those healthcare sites in one shot. They're going versus someone picking one site over the other. It'll go to all of them. We also have for marketers as well our Rep Insights tool, which allows us to monitor reviews coming in and alert them too. And then we built a reply-in platform where you can respond to the review on Google, Yelp, and also Healthgrades. So it does it for the brand and it does it for all the providers. So it's managed all from one platform, a reputation monitoring standpoint as well.
All right. Thank you for that. With that, we're nearing the last moment or two of the presentation for today. I do want to thank you very much, Dan, for your help today, and to Doctor.com. I want to remind everyone again that this presentation was done, at least in part, as a run-up to the 6th annual ASC and Healthcare Management Symposium. It's going to be on November 1st in New York City at the Times Square Marriott Marquis. For all of those who want to register, you can go online and register at www.nymetroasc.com, or you can call 516-393-2294. Again, that's 516-393-2294. Or you can email info@nymetroasc.com. As mentioned earlier today, for those who register within the next 24 hours, there will be a $65 discount, which will bring the cost to $285. I want to thank everyone for the time today. I want to thank you for the questions. If there are any questions there, I think we got to most of the questions. There may have been one or two that we didn't get a chance to respond to. We will also be sending out an email. You can feel free to email us directly at Dan's email address there, as well as mine. You can see it. It's on there, and it will also be in an email that will be globally sent out to everyone who attended this today. Thank you again. Thanks, Dan. And that's a wrap for today.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.